that's really funny that he says that. It's like you just said. It's like, dude, if you condemn slavery, you have to have a moral understanding, dude. You're claiming it's wrong. Why is it wrong? I mean, I agree it's wrong, but why is it wrong?
Yeah. Well, I actually get to that later, because when I push him into the corner where he first entered the stream and was actually trying to compare the law of the Israelites to the law of Hammurabi, I got to point out areas where, by his own subjective justification, he would find areas where the law of Hammurabi was a lot more cruel than anything the Jews put together. And then at that point, I then held his feet to the fire. I said, okay, now how or what standard are you using to judge which of these cultures is more moral than the other? And at that point, he just completely fell apart. Well, there's no answer. I mean, there's no answer to it.
Not if you're an unbeliever.
Not if you're an unbeliever, exactly. So in that case, and I also had to draw a perspective of, even though he's a moral relativist, he can't hide the fact that he has a moral certain position of which to apply the relative leanings to. So he's not purely relativist. I mean, he is, but he doesn't think he is. But he is actually using subjective justifications that he's claiming are objective, and then filtering those through a relativist framework. So it's basically just a house built on clouds is really all it is. There's nothing supporting anything in his moral framework, and that ends up getting pulled out, and he really does collapse in on himself. But anyway, let's
it's funny.
Yeah, let's get back to this. Provide you these things that you utilize and enjoy and purchase. So yes, you support slave trade.
And when necessary.
I'm willing to bet that this flag was made in a Chinese sweatshop. I'm almost willing to bet. I bet if you pulled out the tag or sticker, it probably says made in China here. I'd almost freaking bet on it. Some slave labor textile mill in some third world country. Probably most of the crap in his house is probably owned in some way, shape, or form, having passed through the hands of the slave trade in one form or another.
This is why
the countries as our national policy.
Oh no, you could. But watch him deny that. By the way, watch him try and deny that later. It's really kind of funny. It would be less convenient for you, but you could live consistently with your moral compulsions and avoid purchasing things that come from slave economies, and then you wouldn't be a
how do you know where I purchase what I purchase from where? Are you assuming my computer? Right, but do you know where my computer was manufactured?
Dude, if you think that based upon what you're surrounded by that you've avoided contributing into slave labor economies, you're truly a moron. You're absolutely a complete and utter typical atheist, oblivious moron if you actually think you're going to hold that moral high ground right now. You are a big, stupid joke, Pat. Are you saying?
Well, you're laughing, but do you know?
Like, where do microchips come from? Dude, most of our software components are made in either India or China, two of the biggest slave economies in the world. And you know who helps fuel that? You know who helps fuel these slave economies? People that you voted into office, like Beijing Biden. People that are actually helping to fuel and benefit the oppressive slave economies of the world. Your moral fibers aren't worth anything. That you can't hold a position of consistency to save your life. Modern first world atheists are the most oblivious, unaware, hypocritical, pie-in-the-sky morons you'll ever come across. No doubt about it.
Oh, do you know where my computer was manufactured? Because I actually do.
Oh, my God. Okay, so there's nothing in your computer. You're pretty sure there's nothing in your computer.
I honestly don't. I don't know that. But I know where my computer was assembled.
I know you don't think about things like that. None of you do. I know where my computer was manufactured. Okay, do you really know that every single component that nothing... I don't really know that. Yeah, Pat, thanks. Appreciate it. All you guys want to
do... Right, none of us do.
Pretend morally posture over ancient cultures.
Sure.
You have no justification to posture over. and then you want to turn around and be the biggest hypocrite supporting the very things you claim to condemn.
Smokey, I'm just telling you, I can look at an ancient culture.
This was so much
I can compare them to the cultures around them, which is actually what I did. I didn't compare them. I said by modern standards, and that's a very important caveat, right? So the issue being is we can look at ancient societies and cultures and see how they interacted within the normal social frameworks that the period they lived in, right?
Israel was there given a sanctity of life that none of the other nearby cultures presented, in the idea that the slaves were not treated like mere property or chattel that could potentially be abused and killed upon whim, but actually had human rights. In fact, such human rights given to them that the death of a slave could be paid for by the death of the slave master, because they had the same value under God in terms of a life.
That's not you're actually making shit up right now.
No, you know what, Pat? No, you're making shit up. You are. You go find me the Code of Hammurabi that says that a slave owner can be killed for the death of a slave under them. You go find me that code. Because the Bible, the Jews held to the idea that a slave master who murdered their slave would have his own life forfeit. What is it? 300 some odd pieces of the Hammurabi Code. You go find me the one where a slave master can be killed for a death of one of his slaves. The Jews had it, and this supposedly higher moral code, I haven't found it. So why don't you back up your crap and show me where the equivalency is, where you think it's so superior?
And you know,
Hammurabi gives the exact same penalty for abuse of a slave.
You lying, stupid trash clown.
As the Old Testament. So the Mesopotamians, the ancient people of the Code of Hammurabi,
the Sumerians allowed for the abuse of slaves. So did
so did the Israelites.
No, they didn't. No, you couldn't just kill.
Yes, they did. No, they couldn't, and neither could the ancient Sumerians.
Hang on. Let me stop you there.
There was nothing in the law code of the Sumerians and anything that I found in the Code of Hammurabi that says that there's any penalty for a slave master killing their slave. None. Find it.
It's kind of
give it to me.
And you know what's really sad? It's like he assumes that every law in the Old Testament was from God. It's like, no, there were some laws in the Old Testament God did not want, and all that. Because there is a case in Scripture where slavery is allowed, but that isn't a law from God. It's a law from man.
None of these other contemporary cultures valued life the way the Jews did. None of them. None of them. He wants to talk about chattel slavery, then he needs to talk about all the nations that weren't the Jews. Because they weren't treated like just property. They were human beings, and they had rights. They had to get a day off every year. They had to be allowed to participate in the feasts. They had to be allowed to have private property.
Right. So it's like, exactly. That's my point. Is like, are there instances in the Scriptures where there's immoral slavery? Yes, but it isn't a law from God, because God makes it clear that anybody who slaves trades is in the Bible is condemned, and not only condemned, but in the Old Testament, it's punishable by death.
Yes,
if you trade slaves.
Yes, exactly. If you engage in the forcible slave trade, you should be put to death. Exactly.
Right. Not should be, but will be put to death.
Right. All right, let's move on. Actually, in fact, there's a code in the Sumerian code that says that the woman of the house could actually abuse one of the slave girls simply for looking at her wrong. That was actually allowed. That was a morally allowed thing for them to do. It's actually in the
Sumerian. But they weren't allowed to kill them, were they?
Yes.
See, this is this issue. You're laughing, Smokey. You're laughing, but under the Israeli, we're going to call it underneath
looking at them funny. But could
and as long as you didn't beat your slaves so severely that they didn't.
Again, he's missing the point. There is nothing that I've seen in the Sumerian law that says that there's any penalty for a slave master killing their slave. It's just not there. It just doesn't exist. Oh, they were allowed to kill him? Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing, there's no prohibition there. Go find me one. Find me the prohibition.
They didn't shortly die. You could do that under the Israeli code.
There is nothing in the Sumerian code as a penalty for what an ignorant idiot. What a this guy has studied history. Go look it up. What an ignorant,
I know
moron.
Because it actually says if you injure your slave,
and in fact,
it
wasn't the same thing for the Canaanite culture, which was, of course, this is bigotry. This is nothing other than desperation to conceal vehement anti-Semitic Jew hatred. I'm just going to say it right now. I'm going to say it right now. There is no leg to stand on, yet he's trying to paint this ancient culture as a bunch of evil moral monsters because he wants to attack their God. That's what it's a disgusting, low-life, scummy, hypocritical, bigoted position to take. And it disgusts me that so many atheists are so ignorant, stupid, and disgusting in their personal moral fiber that this is what they delve to. This is what they sink to. Pure blown racial hatred and bigotry in order to justify their disdain for our holy God. What disgusting, foul, sad excuses of human scum. Unreal. Contemporary.
Well, I'm not arguing for the Canaanites, right? I'm arguing for the code.
Oh, of course you wouldn't, because you know why? Because they like to offer their children on red-hot glowing idols and burn them to death. But that you would say that. Do you see? Look at that. Do you see just the wave of the hand? Do you Do you see? Look at how he reacts when I talk about babies being put on burning hot slabs in offering to the pagan god Molech. Just look at his reaction. Wasn't the same thing for the Canaanite culture, which was, of course, contemporary.
Well, I'm not arguing for the Canaanites, right? I'm arguing for the code.
Oh, of course you wouldn't, because you know why? Because they like to offer their children on red hot glowing idols and burn them to death. Look, yeah. Look at the reaction.
Notice the guy answered with a shrug.
Look at this guy for all of his desperate moral posturing this entire time. Look at the They're putting their babies, they were burning their babies to death on red hot idols. I'm all worried about how the Jews treated slaves. Well, the Jews went around and stopped people from burning their children alive. What a disaster. But that you would say that that's evil, but you're also okay with murdering children in their mother's wombs. So I'm not sure really where you get off.
I'm actually not. I'm not okay I'm not okay with it in every circumstance. Am I?
Are you?
I'm not.
Okay. In what circumstance? Okay. In what circumstance are you not?
So I'm pro-abortion through the first trimester. I'm much more restrictive after that point in time. It has to do with an issue of bodily autonomy for me, for women, and also has to do with health and safety of the mother after that point. So in that case, but I'm also, once children are born, I believe that they're fully functioning potential adults that should be protected.
And what if every other culture
by society as much?
And what if every other culture that lived thought of you as a moral monster for holding that position?
And that's fine, but
does that mean anything to you? Does that mean anything to you? That they would all judge you as being a monster for wanting that, or thinking?
But you'd have to prove to me that they think that I'm a moral.
Well,
monster.
let's just say they did, because I would think that quite a few cultures,
sure,
including just the ones 50 years ago in this country, would find that that's offensive of a position to take. At least
sure, they might find it offensive.
Okay, so if that's the case, then what do you care about their moral posturing over you? Right? You don't care, right?
I really don't. Not
then why should we care about your moral posturing over them?
Over ancient cultures?
Yes.
Well, I'm not morally posturing over them, because I'm not asserting that these cultures were divinely inspired to do what they do. It's
you
seem were divinely inspired to do what they do.
An argument about anything being moral or immoral at all. It seems that.
Well, I'm a situational ethicist, am I not?
Oh, sure, I guess so. So ethics depend purely subjectively based upon circumstances, and are subjectively.
Circumstances are very important.
Whatever the agent decides to make them in those.
In some cases,
He's not really purely a situational ethicist, which I'm about to unveil. He's just a philosophically incompetent idiot and a liar. He still has to have a central moral code that he recognizes as objective, that he filters the situations through to come to moral judgments. So he isn't purely choosing ethics based upon circumstances, that the circumstances themselves dictate the ethics. He has ethics that he then filters the circumstances through, and that's what he does not understand.
You have no morality. Genocide.
You have no morality.
I have no morality.
To say anything's wrong. Yeah.
So let me ask you: was the right? So let me ask you, because you're a moral certainist, right? Was it morally okay for the United States to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes.
Okay. So by your standard, that's fine. So what other genocides are you? What other genocides are you okay with?
See, do you see how it works? Do you see how it's always like they go to an area where there's been a moral dilemma, where there is no really good decision. The Japanese had been on a murder rape crusade all across the South Pacific, just doing the most disgusting and monstrous things you could ever imagine, infused into the very moral standards of their culture. You think about, a bunch of innocent people in these towns. Well, they weren't really innocent people. They were civilians, but they weren't really innocent people. The way that the Japanese culture had shifted to the licensing of just untold atrocities required a shock and awe campaign of epic order in order to prevent the Japanese from proliferating and continuing ongoing with their bloodthirsty, savage campaign of murder, rape, and pillaging. So it's one of those things where you would call, a necessary evil in a tragic state of affairs. But the other option, doing nothing or doing something less potent, was a risk that was going to be rough to take, because the nightmare that could have unfolded from a failure to react adequately to put them in their place would have just led to more bloodshed, more death, more suffering, more of it being drawn out, which is why a calculated decision to do that as well. And I think that is one of those instances in history where it is an unfortunate, absolutely awful, savage, necessary evil, because what was being done on the contrary had to be stopped, just had to. And in one of those instances, that was the best way to help maintain that the war that it would end and that would not proliferate into an ongoing generation and cost the lives of even more. And don't forget, this was done on the backs of a incredibly cowardly, opportunistic strike at Pearl Harbor just days before Christmas. So keep in mind that they had earned a reactionary situation of this level with their pure, unbridled, overwhelming savagery. So moving on. I mean, why you think that was done?
Why it was done was a statement of force to force the Japanese submission in World War II.
So that there wouldn't be more bloodshed, more wars, and there wouldn't be more invasions?
But you also know that there was
all he's doing is basically presenting a more complex version of the trolley problem. You're willing to sacrifice one to save five. That's really all it is. It's just a more complex real world version of that. It's a moral dilemma. There is no ultimate right choice. There's a lesser of all evils. It's the best you can do.
A separate plan to possibly drop those bombs in more unpopulated areas that would have caused less civilian casualties, but the military determined that it might not have the psychological
okay. Well, maybe necessary. They didn't. Okay.
So in order to ensure the certitude of Japanese submission, heavily populated centers were chosen so that an unknown amount, because I don't think they actually knew, of Japanese civilians would be equal.
See, he's giving the justification. He's not even really telling me if he disagrees with the justification. He's just putting it out there. Okay, sure.
Affected, because demoralizing the military was different than demoralizing the civilian population.
Yeah.
So it was a war that specifically targeted. It was an act that specifically targeted civilians, and you think that was a moral act?
Unnecessary evil. See, like, and the way he says it, like he wants you to think, quote unquote, civilian means innocent. That is definitely not how that worked and how that looked and how that was operating back then. Like that these people that were living in these civilian centers were not the cultural fuel of the monstrosities that the Japanese felt perfectly fine demonstrating and perpetrating across their little corner of the globe. No, sir. Sorry. Bad argument.
Unnecessary evil. Okay. So
in instances where there's moral dilemmas, there's instances where you can always choose the least offensive or the least worst.
So all of these,
hold on, real quick. Just because you're put in a situation where there's a moral dilemma doesn't mean there's not a moral underlying layer or objective moral code. Right. You're appealing to decide how to land on a moral dilemma.
Right. So all of those unborn children in Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
all
those young children that had not reached accountability yet. So all of those atomic abortions that occurred because their mother was 8.5 weeks pregnant. But that's what happened, right? They were destroyed in their mother in utero. And we just talked about my position on children.
Okay, so is that really the same? If it really is an equivalency you're painting here, Pat, I guess you're saying that the thing that happened in Hiroshima is the equivalent to the modern abortion. So apparently we should eradicate the mother when we murder her child. I guess if you really want to make this, apples and apples comparison. What a stupid clown.
Killed within their mother's womb. You seem to have a certain level of certitude that it would always be wrong.
That was an act of war.
You there.
That was an act of war. Like, and
like
an act of war versus I don't think I can afford this child. I think I'm going to go murder it. This is now the moral paradigm we're comparing with Pat. Great. Is the woman waging war on the fetus? Is this what's going on in his head or something here?
In war, so now you're saying acts in war, it's okay in certain circumstances to target civilians.
If the act of war is to ultimately attempt to prevent more war, what were the Japanese doing before this happened?
Oh, I'm not saying that ultimately it wasn't a moral act. You're the one with the moral. I'm a moral relativist, right? So I can justify based on circumstances.
That's not how that works. Again, you missed my point about how whether or not you choose, you don't determine based on circumstances. You determine circumstances based upon what you hold to be moral. You're ontologically backwards, Pat, and you're too stupid and incompetent to know it. Which side of the moral dilemma you lie upon has to do with an underlying moral frame of reference, which you claim to be objective. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to make a choice. If he was a true moral relativist, he would never say something is actually wrong, because you really can't. Because it's all relative to situation, and then it's also relative to the agent who's in the situation making the judgment. It's just pure shifting sand. It's just whatever you feel. It's just nothing. There are no morals if you're really truly from that perspective, one way or the other. You wouldn't be able to apply anything to your relativistic. You have a code that you're applying relativistically to circumstances. Correct. I'm asking you for the justification of that underlying code, not how you apply it. I'm looking for your source of the morality you're applying to the relativism. And it's just your culture.
Largely has to do with being. It's just your mostly has my culture.
Okay, then nothing is actually moral. There it is. It's just my culture and my feelings. There. So nothing's immortal. Nothing is immoral to him. So he never has any argument against what's moral or immoral in the Bible. Done. Debate over. No, he doesn't get it, though. He doesn't get that he just ended it. He basically just conceded the point that now destroys every stupid thing him and that blundering idiot Oz came in and started with. Just gone. Undermined. Dead in the water. Yep. I can't actually really say anything's immoral, so I shouldn't have come in here and said that the Bible is immoral, should I? Well, Pat and Oz are too stupid and prideful to realize that, so let's listen to the rest of the Spurg fit, shall we?
My inclination towards humanism, right?
No,
again,
humanism.
Then if I'm culturally subjective, right?
That's just an argument. And if I would have taken the time to go down the realm of justification of morality through humanism, the circles I would have taken him down. Oh, Pat, I hope you have the semblance of a spine to come back and confront me and discuss that with me. I hope you'll come back and let's discuss that beautiful little nugget. For your feelings, it's not an argument for morality. There's no reason for anyone.
Morality is a social construct.
There's
right?
There's no reason for anyone to care what you feel is moral. Any more so for you to care what someone in the ancient Near East felt.
Why do I
to you?
Right, but it's comparative, right? So the issue for me is comparison.
My point is, your whole point of coming in here and being like, the Bible is immoral or the Jews are immoral.
I didn't say the Bible is immoral.
Did you say? Do you think the Jews were immoral? Yeah, absolutely. They both started in here talking about how what's written in the Bible is either immoral, less moral than the Hammurabi Code, which has already been annihilated. Now he's backpedaling.
Certain of the issues compared to the.
Oh, that's right. I can't actually say anything's immoral. Well, I never said it was immoral. Pat, you're a coward and an idiot.
There's no immorality. The system itself was the moral system of the ancient people.
Okay,
right?
You believe God doesn't exist, right?
Correct.
So who wrote the Bible?
A bunch of people.
Jews, right? Bunch of Jews. Did they write a bunch of immoral?
Jews, yeah.
Okay. Did they write a bunch of immoral laws or moral laws?
Laws they thought were moral at the time they wrote.
Bam. And there it is. Just like we write laws that we think are moral at the time, they wrote laws that they think are moral at the time. So what is the justification that his subjective, relativistic, cultural morality is superior to theirs? What is the ultimate standard? Oh boy.
Wrote them.
So were they moral to them? Because you're a dude. You said you're a relativist.
I agree that they. I agree they thought they were moral.
Okay.
Right. They thought they were moral.
Did you say you're a relativist?
Yes.
Okay.
So they thought they were moral. They believed them to be moral.
Dude. So relatively speaking, if you were living back then, you would find them to be moral.
Likely, I would.
There you go. Done. He just validated all the moral codes in the Old Testament right there. Done. That was it. Right there. He's sinking fast and can't even notice how bad he's sinking into every single one of his perspective arguments. Man, this was beautiful. I really enjoyed this. This was actually pretty amazing. There you go. So they're not immoral.
But you're missing one big important preference.
I watch that again. Just watch this again. If you speak, dude. So relatively speaking, if you were living back then, you would find them to be moral.
Likely I would.
There you go. So they're not immoral.
But you're missing one big important preference. Your claim.
That is how his own mechanism of claimed moral relativism that is judged in a relative set of relatively speaking, is set to judge based upon setting and circumstances. His own standard now dictates that the Jews were actually moral. Ladies and gentlemen, let this be a moment for you. Remember this and share this stream around. We got an atheist to admit, based upon their own moral framework, that the ancient Jews were just perfectly moral and fine. Make sure you share that around. Let people know. Basement Dweller, if you're in, you could even maybe go and grab a little clip of this. I might even do it later because it's just so spot on here on this one. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty gross. So share it around that we got an atheist to admit that the ancient Jewish codes are just perfectly moral and just fine. Make sure you share that around.
Good job, Pat. God.
Good job. Yeah.
In your system, the laws were given by God. Sure. And that is a God, omnipotent, right?
So what?
That omnipotent, all-powerful, and all-knowing.
And you see, and this is where they commit a massive fallacious error. In fact, Danny even nailed it later on, talking about how they come in and mix an internal critique with an external critique. They go to the begging the question assumption for the eternal critique that God exists, and then they claim God is immoral based upon an external critique of their moral framework. There's no consistent internal critique, which is why this is such a failed, fallacious, and stupid argument that this dumblet just pried out of the barely functional brains of Matt Dillahunty and Dr. Josh. It's really all it is. You just said those laws aren't immoral.
No, that's not what I said. I didn't say that. I said that I would consider them immoral because this is the issue. This is why you're not realizing how bad your argument is, Smokey.
Oh, it's so
You're
bad.
saying I believe in God. God gives laws. I'm saying people create.
If it's so bad for me, Pat, please share it to everyone you know. Please show everyone this video. Every single one of your atheist friends. I hope you go to every single one of your atheist friends and you show this video to them and then you try to brag over it. I hope you do. Oh, please, Pat, do me a huge favor. Just advertise how well you think you roasted this theist, Smokey Saint, and just spread this video everywhere. Oh, please.
Laws and moral systems. And there's a big difference between our arguments.
Thanks for that.
I'm a product of my culture. No different than if I would have grown up during the Crusades in Western Europe, I probably would have been a crusader. And I would have thought it was a moral system.
There you go. Yeah, so it's not immoral. So you have no argument that anything in the Bible,
whether or not it was immoral or not, doesn't mean that we can't look at it by modern standards and say
that is, yes, it does mean that. That is exactly, you can't do that. That is exactly what that means, is that you can't do it. Means that morality is relative to the culture. So you can't use another culture to judge the morality of another culture, or else you're violating your own claim of your own standard of morality, that it's relativistic based upon culture, time, and circumstance. By your own admission, you have zero justification to claim that another culture is wrong based upon your cultural perspective, because you say that everyone's moral cultural perspective is valid. No matter what they teach, no matter what they believe, no matter what they believe to be moral, it's valid because you're a relativist. Ooh. Oof, oof, oof. Ouch, Pat. Ouch.
That was actually improper. By modern standards, is immoral.
Because that's something called bigotry. That's called
harsh.
Presentist bigotry. Yes, it is. Look it up.
No, it's not.
I know what it is, and it's presentist bigotry.
I know what.
That is applying.
Well, first of all, ethnocentric. Are you an ethnocentric?
That is applying the standard of your own modern culture, your own standard of culture to other cultures and judging them. Ask me if I'm an ethnocentrist. God. What a freaking doublet. Oh my God.
I know what.
That is applying.
Well, first of all, ethnocentric. Are you an ethnocentric?
That is applying the standards of your own modern culture, your own standard of culture to other cultures and judging them immoral. It is a form of bigotry, sir. Yes, it is.
Sure.
Okay.
It's only the people like yourself that are.
Please don't.
I'm not a bigot
to the ancient Jews.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for telling me who I can and cannot be a bigot to. That's awesome.
Oh, do you like being bigoted?
Oh,
that was a revealing moment. Hey, don't you tell me I'm a big bigoted too. I'm a big virtue signaling liberal. And I say we don't be bigoted to anyone, but I'm allowed to be bigoted to who I want to. Wow. What a moment. You know what? That needs to be its own, you know what? That's just going to be its own little clip. I'm going to clip that out. And that's just going to be its own independent, little, beautiful, absolute, unhinged, spastic failure right here. Listen to this. Giving them a moral. It is a form of bigotry, sir. Yes, it is.
Sure.
Okay.
It's only the people like yourself that are.
Please don't
I'm
be
not
a
a bigot
to the ancient Jews.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for telling me who I can and cannot be a bigot to. That's all.
Oh, ouch. Ouch. And by the way, I'm betting Pat is one of those big, stupid, fat, overprivileged white liberals that says you're not allowed to ever be a bigot to anyone, but don't you dare tell him to not be a bigot to the Jews. I bet Pat spends a lot of time speaking up for wokeness. I bet he's a big fan of saying how the world needs to be more tolerant and there should be no bigots anywhere. And here's him saying, you can't tell me who to be bigoted to. I tell everyone else to not be bigoted to anyone, but I can be bigoted to anyone I want. Wow. Pat, you're a retard. You're an immoral, gutter-brained, unsophisticated, completely hopeless idiot. Wow. Just imagine a Democrat, a liberal, saying to you, don't tell me who I can be bigoted to. You know the people who spend their whole life saying no one's allowed to be bigoted to anyone? All of a sudden saying to you, you can't tell them who they're allowed and not allowed to be bigoted to. Just meditate on the pure, unfiltered lack of awareness and hypocrisy there. Wow. Wow. I'll give you an update at the end, Kincaid. We're going to wrap up here soon. I got to get ready to go here pretty quickly.
That's awesome.
Oh, do you like being bigoted?
I can
problem for you?
I can analyze
giant hateful bigot.
Are you going to keep talking over me?
I got to play that one more time. That's got to be just seen in its full splendor. That's just wow.
No sense.
That is applying the standards of your own modern culture, your own standard of culture to other cultures and judging them immoral. It is a form of bigotry, sir. Yes, it is.
Sure.
Okay.
It's only the people like yourself that are.
Please don't.
I'm not a bigot.
Bigot to the ancient Jews.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for telling me who I can and cannot be a bigot to. That's
that I made in between. I know I lied about the things I said to me.